Introduce. So we call the order here.
All right, guys, go ahead.
I'd like to call a meeting of the Development Review Board to order, August 21st, 2012. Let me introduce the members of the board present this evening. Milt Surdam, Dan Merlenberg, Bill Barney, Ron Alderman, Barry Hurst. I'm Charles Kopp. Dan Monks is our zoning administrator.
Okay, thank you. First item on our agenda tonight are the minutes from our last meeting. I move to accept.
Okay, motion to accept.
I'll second.
Milt seconds.
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Okay. We have a oath statement that we ask everybody to sign if they are going to speak this evening. It contains the following oath statement. I solemnly swear or affirm under the pains and penalty of perjury that the statements I make, testimony I give, and other evidence I submit to the board at the board's public hearing held on this date shall be true and correct to the best of my knowledge and belief. Again, that's right over there. We ask you to sign that before you speak this evening. Next item is disclosure of any ex parte communications and or conflicts of interest regarding the matters this evening before the board this evening.
Nope, see any.
Okay. Our first hearing this evening is United Community Properties at 314 Dewey Street. These folks are seeking approval for the relocation in addition to an existing United Counseling Service building at that location. This is the second hearing. At the first hearing, the board did grant preliminary approval, and Jeff Goldstone is here to answer any questions you have.
Good evening. There have been very small plan changes that I just want to bring to your attention. I know you have a smaller copy of the plan in front of you, but I'll bring them to your attention. They're all things that were discussed last week, and one additional one. At the entrance driveway, we've eliminated some of the shrubs to get better access, visual access to the sign that we intend to place in that location, as well as better visuals to the street for people who are exiting the driveway. I've identified the sign as being a lighted sign, and we have introduced a bulkhead door to the crawl space at the north side of the site, and you can see that on the far end of the building. Other than, one other thing we discussed last week, that we'd be putting some combination of curbing and guardrails around the parking lot where we want to be sure that we have protected the vehicles from going over the edge of the grading. We've shown that guardrail. We intend to use a pressure-treated wood guardrail. We haven't designed it yet, but it's going to be a low guardrail. And we have also shown a short section of curbing removed, where last week we discussed the stormwater runoff into the retention pond. Other than that, the drawing is the same as the one that you reviewed last week, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board? Okay, nobody in the audience. Okay. Need a motion?
Motion to close the hearing would be appropriate.
We're going to go into deliberative session. Gary?
I'll move to close the hearing and go to deliberative session.
Okay. Bill seconds?
Yeah, I'll second.
All in favor?
Okay.
You're all set, Jeff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next hearing this evening is the Green Mountain Mennonite Fellowship. They're up on Chapel Road, and you recall they're seeking approval for a new 51-plot cemetery. This application, this is also the second hearing for this application. It did receive preliminary approval at the first hearing, and John Andrews is here to present.
Good evening.
Hi.
John Andrews. Sorry I'm late.
Lost your place.
That's okay, as long as I'm still on the agenda. Traffic was a little ugly. At the last hearing, I presented the 51-place cemetery concept, and we did receive preliminary approval from the board. There were a couple concerns that the board had. One was the paved apron leading into the cemetery for the entrance drive, and we now have that indicated as being 20 feet from the property line. There was also some confusion about the lines on the plan. Turns out that there were some sketches and boundary abstract lines that were turned on in our drawing that were printed, and they shouldn't have been printed. So the drawings that we're going to submit for the filed maps are going to be much clearer. The other concern was a typo on the plans, which we fixed. Now, after the meeting, in spite of the fact that you did offer preliminary approval, we spoke to the Schrams, the neighbors. And we had a discussion, very productive discussion. They were a little bit concerned about the proximity of the cemetery to their house, their deck. They didn't want to see it, or they didn't want to see as much of it. So we did a couple of things, I guess you could say major things, to accommodate them. And it was agreed upon by the Mennonite trustees and the neighbors. So these are the things we did. I'll go down through them. We indicated on the map that there would be preservation of existing vegetation along the Schramm-Sudley boundary line. We moved the entrance road. It's very hard to see on this, but we moved the entrance road so it was essentially parallel to this angled line, which is the northerly line of Leach. And then what we did is we took the entire cemetery and moved it about 50 feet to the south. And we moved it a little bit further away from the Leach's property line as well. And what that did is gave much more of a vegetated buffer between the Schramm's property and the cemetery. It also got us away from these very large trees that are in here, which we want to leave. And it also got us away from this trail that's indicated on the map, which we were told was a, well, for lack of a better term, ATV superhighway. So, very important in terms of preserving everybody's sanity. So those are the things we did in order to make sure that the cemetery could be moved further south. We did 2 additional test pits in the northwest and southwest corners of the cemetery. And the soils were basically the same we found in the other location. They're basically sandy, silty gravel. Some big rocks, but nothing the excavating contractor or whoever digs graves or whatever the case may be is going to have much of a problem with. So those are essentially the changes that were made, and we're asking for final approval.
Any questions? Milt?
I got thinking afterwards too, John, on it. Do you think because of the test wells that you had there, that they stuck up like sore thumbs down in there, so that might have been a concern? They were thinking they were going to have a view like that one. In reality, the cemetery itself will probably be quite low. Stones won't be high or anything.
Well, that's another thing that it's not on the plans, but that's a thing that they discussed putting into their bylaws, and that would be an internal discussion amongst themselves, is to only have flat headstones. And not larger gravestones, but they indicated that typically their headstones are small to begin with, but they could certainly put a stipulation in the cemetery bylaws that says that the headstones are flat or only stick up a couple inches, and that essentially you wouldn't see them at all from any vantage point except within the cemetery itself.
Anything else? We need a motion to close and go to deliberative session. Barry?
I move that we close the hearing, go to deliberative session.
Ron, seconds. All in favor? What's that, John?
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you for making those changes.
Good job.
Anything else, Dan?
I have no other business this evening.
I got one thing there, Dan, Charlie. Has to do with the Regional Affordable Housing Corporation project on North Branch Street. We approved that back in April, of course.
Yeah.
I drive by there very frequently. I live on the road. And of course, you go by, glance at it, see what's going on, that's the construction. A few weeks ago, I was going by, and something looked right, and I saw one road going in and out. And I should be 2 there probably. So the next time I went by, there's no traffic, so I stopped and looked. It seems there's only one way of ingress and egress. And my understanding is that any subdivision requires 2 ways in and out. The bylaw doesn't say why, but we've had discussions about that, and it's been brought out that you need a way for emergency vehicles, police cars, fire trucks, ambulance, in case one road is blocked. They need a way to get in, or someone a way to get out. And I think, I went back to the site plan, as far as I could see, there's only one road in there, and they're wondering if we were remiss in not requiring two, and if we were, how the heck are we missing? If it is required, I mean.
I don't think it's that deep, is it?
Mine light on here, clue me in.
There's several reasons. Well, first of all, any subdivision requirements can be waived by the board. Specifically, it's allowed for in the bylaws.
I didn't see that, Emmett.
And I did go back and look at that, and I think the reasoning behind that is a very short drive. It's the access as far as fire trucks, that sort of thing. They can easily get hoses into the very far end of it. It's only 14 total units, whereas most of the ones where we've required two have been 40, 100, et cetera, long roads with several dwellings in them without easy access to infrastructure. So I think that's the reasoning behind that.
I kind of looked it up, and I didn't see where left room for any exceptions. It
is very clear that any way that
it's in there somewhere, huh?
I'd be happy to review it with you. Yeah, after we talked about it after the meeting, I went to look at it,
yeah.
And it's definitely.
Yeah, you're going to get back to me, then you didn't. So I thought you got tied up with bigger things there. I know that. You're pretty busy lately.
Well, on a subdivision, there has to be a certain amount of houses before that kicks in?
The trigger typically is 4 or 5, up to 5, and then unless there's unique circumstances or the board finds that there's an appropriate conditions for waiver, then they can be waived.
If you had a long stretch of a subdivision that's only 150 feet deep or 100 feet deep that went along a road, it wouldn't be necessary to have multiple. It'd be all along, your units would be all along a highway. I don't know the circumstances here, Ron, I didn't look at it, but my first impression would be probably it's not very deep.
No, it's what? I'd say about 150 yards, 700 feet down in there probably or something. But it does say that they got to have them, but Dan says there is a provision for a waiver somewhere, and I couldn't find it.
You have to look in the PRD section, the planned residential. PRD. Planned residential.
Oh, one is a PUD, I think. No? Okay.
No, a PUD involves commercial. PRD is planned residential development.
I should look at that. Okay.
We can chat about it.
I'll be right.
Yeah, I could show you after the meeting. Yeah.
You know your job. You're probably right. Thank you. Okay. If it's not there, though, we're going to hear about it again. Thanks. That's all I had.
I'll make a motion, we move to deliver it, or close the meeting.
Okay.
Move to the deliberative session.
Second it. Okay, all in favor? Thank you, Dan.